Yo, what's good? Amateur Lore here. So we're back today with every Big East basketball team's deepest tournament run. And after this, we only have the ACC and SEC to go. Then we will be all done and have covered every Power 5 conference. Also, if you're wondering if there will be more March Madness magical runs type of videos in the future, don't worry, we've got a steamy one coming in a couple of days after this video drops. But yeah, these vids take a while to make, so a like and a sub would be smacko. But let's jump right into every Big East team's deepest tournament run. Alright, the first team we're going to be taking a look at in the Big East is the Butler Bulldogs. And before someone drops the comment, I know they're new to the Big East, as they only have played in this conference for 12 years. And for their deepest tournament run, I have to go back to when they were a member of the Horizon Conference and would reach back-to-back national title games. We're going to be using their most recent one for their deepest run, which takes us to the year 2010/2011, when the 23-9 Butler basketball team led by coach Brad Stevens would enter March Madness as an 8th seed, going on an incredible run for the second year in a row, defeating their first two opponents in the tournament by a combined 3 points, winning 60-58 against Old Dominion and 71-70 against the first-seeded Pitt Panthers. Butler would be matched up against the 4th-seeded Wisconsin Badgers in the Sweet 16 and would handle them 61-54, sending them to the Elite 8, where they would play against my second-seeded Florida Gators. This game would be an all-time classic, as it would take overtime to decide the victor, and sadly for me, it wouldn't be my Florida Gators, as the Butler Bulldogs would come out on top 74-71, sending them to the Final Four for the second season in a row. In the Final Four, the Bulldogs would be matched up against another bracket buster in the 11th-seeded VCU Rams. Butler would defeat the Rams 70-62 and face off against UConn in the national championship, where they would lose 53-41, putting an end to Butler's deepest tournament run to date. Next team up in the Big East is the Creighton Bluejays, and I was kind of shocked to find out that Creighton has never made it to the Final Four, which is crazy to me because in the 2010s when I was really into college basketball, the Bluejays were always one of those basketball schools in the mix. Anyway, for Creighton's deepest tournament run, we don't have to go back very far, as in the 2022/2023 college basketball season, the Bluejays went into the tournament with a 21-12 record, as well as being given the 6th seed in the South region. Coach Greg McDermott would have his troops ready, as they would advance past their first two opponents, winning against North Carolina State and Baylor. In the Sweet 16, the Bluejays would be blessed with the matchup against the 15th-seeded Princeton Tigers, winning by 11, 86-75, sending Creighton to the Elite 8, where they would face off against the 5th-seeded San Diego State Aztecs. Sadly, the Bluejays would fall short to San Diego State 57-56, ending their tournament and being their deepest run to date. Moving over to the DePaul Blue Demons, did y'all know that they haven't made the NCAA men's basketball tournament since 2003/2004? That might be the longest streak in this conference. Don't quote me on that though. So for this team's deepest tournament run, we have to go back to the 1978/1979 college basketball season, where led by Coach Ray Meyer, the at the time powerhouse DePaul Blue Demons would enter the tournament with the 2nd seed and march their way to the Final Four, defeating 7th-seeded USC, 3rd-seeded Marquette, and the number 1-seeded UCLA Bruins in the Elite 8 to advance to the Final Four, where we would see two future NBA stars match up, as DePaul was playing against Larry Bird and Indiana State. Oh yeah, and if you're wondering who the star on the Blue Demons was, it was Mavericks legend Mark Aguirre. And this is random, but bro averaged like 24 points as a freshman, which is cold as hell if you ask me. But yeah, DePaul versus Indiana State would go down to the wire, but it would be Larry Bird advancing to the Natty versus Magic Johnson in Michigan State, as DePaul would lose 76-74 to the Sycamores. But to end this section on a positive note, DePaul would win the 3rd place game versus the Penn Quakers. Next up, we have the Georgetown Hoyas. And first thing I'm going to say is we need Georgetown playing basketball at the high level this program is known for, because in the last 9 seasons, this program has fallen off the map. But you can't keep a program with such a rich history down forever. For this program's deepest tournament run, we have to go back to Georgetown's lone national title, which came in the 1983/1984 college basketball season, led by coaching legend John Thompson and college and NBA legend Patrick Ewing. The Hoyas would claim the 1 seed in the tournament, and in their first game would barely defeat Southern Methodist, as the final score would be 37-36, which is one of the weirdest scores I've ever seen. From there, the Hoyas would win against UNLV and Dayton, setting up a Final Four matchup against the Kentucky Wildcats. Georgetown would come to play and would come out on top 53-40, sending them to the Natty, where they would defeat Houston 84-75 to win their one and only Natty. From Washington, D.C., we head to Wisconsin for the Marquette Golden Eagles. This program has been one of the most successful ones in the Big East Conference, winning a Natty and going to 3 Final Fours. And this doesn't mean anything, but my dad is a huge Heat fan, and Marquette has produced 2 of the best Heat ever in D. Wade and don't hate me Heat fans, but Jimmy Butler too. For Marquette's deepest tournament run, we have to go back to the year they won it all, which was back in 1976/1977, when the Golden Eagles would enter the tournament led by Coach Al McGuire with a record of 19-7. In their first game, they would breeze by Cincinnati, but in their next game against Kansas State, they would barely escape with a win, but nevertheless would come out on top 67-66. From there, Marquette would run the Carolinas gauntlet, defeating Wake Forest 82-68, Charlotte 51-49, and finally in the national championship, the Golden Eagles would come out on top of the North Carolina Tar Heels, winning 67-59, giving Marquette their lone men's basketball title to date. Coming in next, we got the Providence Friars, a pretty decent overall basketball program who has made 2 Final Fours in their history. One of those are obviously going to be the Friars' deepest March Madness run, so let's take a look at their most recent one. So going back to the 1986/1987 college basketball season, Providence was heading into the tournament with a 21-8 record, led by your local Hooker's favorite coach, and shit, if I was one of his players, maybe he'd be my favorite coach too, Rick Pitino. Riz Pitino would have his boys ready as they would cruise by their first game in the tournament versus my little sister's school UAB 90-68, and would follow that butt whooping up with a much closer 90-87 win against Austin Peay in overtime. The Friars would win their next 2 tournament games by 15 plus points, defeating Alabama and Georgetown, advancing to the Final Four where they would get smacked by the Orange 77-63, putting an end to Providence's deepest tournament run to date. Next up we have the Seton Hall Pirates, and I don't know why, but I could have swear this program was elite. I guess I was wrong, as in the program's 100 plus years of playing basketball, they've only made the college basketball tournament 14 times. So you know the choices for their deepest run was slim. But hey, at least they made the Final Four. There are plenty of high-level programs that can't say that. So for their deepest run, it's going to be the season they made it to the Final Four, which was back in 1988/1989, where a 25-6 third-seeded Pirates basketball squad, led by coach PJ Carlissimo, would march their way to the national championship game, defeating Missouri State and Evansville in their first 2 matchups, then would follow that up with double-digit wins against Indiana and UNLV, and would continue the dominant play in the Final Four, defeating the second-seeded Duke Blue Devils 95-78. With all this momentum and how good the Pirates were playing, it was a shock to see them lose a very close game to the Michigan Wolverines in the national championship 80-79. Next team up in the Big East is the St. John's Red Storm. And real quick, this is off topic, but the Red Storm have had 2 hoopers who I really mess with play with them. The first dude is Chris Mullin because he's absolutely automatic on NBA 2K Blacktop and is one of the best shooters of all time. And the other dude is Marcus Levette. Does any hoopers remember him from Hoop Mixtape? Bro had the best handles from a high schooler I've ever seen. I wonder what he's on now. Anyway, St. John's has been to 2 Final Fours in their long history, with their most recent one coming during the 1984/85 college basketball season, where a Red Storm team that had 6 dudes on it who'd sniffed the NBA, most notably Chris Mullin and the dude responsible for Steph Curry's success in the NBA, Mark Jackson, would enter the NCAA tournament with a 27-3 record and the first seed in the West, winning their first game against Southern 83-59, then following that blowout with a close win against the Razorbacks 68-65. The Red Storm wasn't satisfied with just beating up on one current SEC team, as they would win by 16 over the Kentucky Wildcats 86-70, advancing them to the Elite Eight where they would face off against the third-seeded NC State Wolfpack. A 25-point night from Chris Mullin would be more than enough to push the Red Storm over the top, winning against NC State 69-60, sending them to the Final Four where they would get torn apart by a Patrick Ewing-led Georgetown squad, ending the St. John's Red Storm's deepest tournament run to date. For the UConn Huskies, the next team up in the Big East, I think for their deepest tournament run is pretty obvious. And real quick, I need y'all to let me know down below in the comments, is UConn the new big dogs of the college basketball world? As they have been to 7 Final Fours with 6 national championships, which pretty much means if they make the Final Four, they're probably going to win it all. And also to add on top of that, their last 5 natties have came in the last 20 years, which is just ridiculous. Especially in a sport like college basketball, when the playoffs is just a large tournament where predicting the winner is a giant crapshoot. But I guess my point in saying all that is bravo UConn, you're them. So for their deepest tournament run, we only have to go back to last year, as they are the defending national champions, where led by the madman Dan Hurley would enter the tournament as the first seed with a 31-3 record and absolutely torched their way to the Final Four, leaving no survivors, defeating every opponent in their way by 10 or more points. Winning against Stetson 91-52, Northwestern 75-58, San Diego State 82-52, Illinois 77-52, and if you think things slow down in the Final Four, think again, as against Bama the Huskies would win 86-72 and in the finals would defeat Purdue 75-60, securing the natty for the 2nd year in a row. From a team who has won 5 natties in the last 20 years, we transitioned to a team who has won 2 natties in the last 10 years, the New York Knicks, the Villanova Wildcats. So this program is definitely a part of the upper echelon of the Big East, as Villanova in their long history of playing basketball has been to 7 Final Fours and have won 3 natties in total, with 2 of them, as I mentioned earlier, coming in the last 10 years. So for the Wildcats' deepest tournament run, we're going to have to take a look at their most recent title run, which came in the 2017/2018 college basketball season, where a 30-4 Wildcat squad coached by Jay Wright and led by 3 future Knicks, them being Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, and Dante DiVincenzo, as well as 4 other future NBA picks, would enter the tournament as the 1 seed and go on one of the most dominant March Madness runs I've ever seen, as they would beat every team they faced off against by 12 or more points. Starting off with Radford, as Villanova would easily handle them 87-61. The Wildcats didn't care if you were a big school or a small one, as in their next game they would face off against Alabama and do pretty much the same thing, winning 81-58 to advance to the Sweet 16 versus West Virginia, where they would win by 12. Villanova was running the Big 12 gauntlet because their next 2 games of the tournament would be against Texas Tech and Kansas. The Wildcats would beat the Red Raiders 71-59 and the Kansas Jayhawks in the Final Four 95-79, sending Villanova to the national championship, where they would face off against 7-seeded Michigan and finish off their extremely dominant March Madness run with the 79-62 win against the Wolverines. Alright, we're nearly done with every Big East team, just one more to go. And something that I want to say real quick is the Big East might be pound for pound the best basketball conference because they definitely have a smaller amount of teams compared to the other Power 6 schools, yet the Big East always has a couple of teams in the thick of things going into March. Alright, so for the last team in the Big East, we're looking at the Xavier Musketeers. Man, if I'm being honest, growing up I always remembered them being somewhat of a pretty good and consistent basketball school. So I was kind of shocked to find out that Xavier has never been to a Final Four. But don't get it confused, this program has still had plenty of tournament success, making 3 Elite Eights, with their most recent one coming less than a decade ago, so that will obviously be the one we're going to take a look at for this program's deepest tournament run. Alright, so for the 2016/17 Musketeers, this team was led by coach Chris Mack and would enter the tournament with a decent record but nothing crazy, as they would be 21-13, which was good enough to earn them the 11th seed. Their first two games of the men's basketball tournament would be pure domination from Xavier. They would upset Maryland 76-65 and the third seeded Florida State Seminoles 91-66. And trust me, as a Gator fan, I enjoyed watching that game. The Musketeers would advance to the Sweet 16 from there and continue their unlikely run as they would take down the second seeded Arizona Wildcats in a barn burner 73-71, sending Xavier to their third Elite Eight to date, where unfortunately they'd run into a loaded Gonzaga squad where they would get smacked around 83-59, putting an end to Xavier's deepest run to date, and also putting it into this video. If you made it this far in the video, you're a champ and deserve a trophy. And also be sure to like and comment. But yeah, that's just about going to do it for this video. If there's any other topics or subjects you want to see me cover, comment them down below. I'm out.